Hello and welcome to the CUFI UK podcast for Zion's sake. My name is Alastair, this is Alex.
Hello.
And we would like to welcome you as we discuss some of the latest issues relating to Israel and the Jewish people. We're glad you can join us today on this latest podcast, but please remember to like, share and follow on whatever platform you are listening or watching this to, so that we can get the word out about standing with Israel and also, we trust, communicate something of the truth.
Yeah.
So, Alex, we're going to begin with a topic which is very relevant at the moment. It's in the news. It's Labour's what would seem to be an ongoing problem with anti-Semitism within the party.
Yeah.
Perhaps we had thought, rightly or wrongly, that some of the problems of anti-Semitism within the party was a thing of the past, following the end of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the party. But that isn't the case, is it?
No, exactly. And so, I think this is another example of why we need to stay on top of this, actually, because I think even though Keir Starmer has put out a strong front against anti-Semitism, clearly they're not really ever going to be able to eradicate anti-Semitism from the party entirely, but they do have to act every time that it happens. Mm-hmm. So they have acted. It took them a little while to act. But should we first of all talk about what he actually said? Well,
yes, because there've been three Labour councillors that have now been, or candidates for upcoming elections, which have been suspended by the party. So it began with Azhar Ali. He is a Labour candidate for the upcoming by-election in Rochdale. So he told the Lancashire Labour Party that Israel deliberately allowed the Hamas atrocity to take place in order to give it the, quote, green light to invade Gaza.
Yeah.
So a complete conspiracy right there about this being a fabricated attack which was allowed by Israel. So completely unacceptable.
Yeah, and that sort of narrative, by the way, is very common on social media. Like the victim blaming Israel for Hamas committing atrocities. I think actually if we can expand on that a little bit, because when it comes to what that sort of narrative is, I honestly think it's very damaging, because that has been very prevalent on social media, and a lot of the denial of what happened on the 7th of October has come from that spirit, that narrative, right? And I think what he's doing there is he sees Israel so badly, in such a bad light, that he sees them as willing to sacrifice their own people in the worst massacre since the Holocaust in order to then massacre Palestinians. That's what his narrative is. And it shows like how deeply he sees Israel as being evil. And he's actually then giving Hamas a pass, really, because he's saying this wasn't Hamas's fault, this wasn't the Palestinians, this was Israel. Well, Hamas were the ones who broke across the border and murdered and raped and butchered and burned and pillaged, right?
Yes.
Like, they did not need any goading from Israel. They did not need any permission from Israel to do that. Israel had no involvement in that.
Yes.
Israel was blindsided, and it was a failure of Israel's security, but it wasn't because Israel wanted an excuse.
No.
It was because Hamas hates Israel and the Jewish people, and there is an anti-Semitic spirit behind it.
Absolutely.
It's not because Israel, and that's the thing. I mean, and that's why his comment is anti-Semitic, because he's so anti-Semitic. He's blaming the Jews for the death of Jews. That is just absolutely atrocious.
Yes, it is. And it's important that you've established that link between this view on Israel, this disparaging view on Israel, and anti-Semitism, because there was a period in time when it was debated whether or not this anti-Zionism that existed within parts of the Labour Party was anti-Semitic. Well, now we are seeing these views elevated on a completely different scale, because here we are in the aftermath of the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And now we're beginning to see true colours from those who've been harbouring these views, actually, for, this hasn't just developed since the 7th of October. This has been a view, which is why it's so important that we have been trying to tackle this issue head on, to try and make it clear to people that actually there is a problem, be it in any party, but particularly in this case with the Labour Party, there is a problem and it does have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
But that was the initial thing. And of course, Keir Starmer, there was some delay in responding to that, apparently. But then there was new information that came to light. And that was that this Labour candidate, Azhar Ali, he apparently, he attended an event of pro-Palestinian activists, actually back a few weeks after the 7th of October event. But this has come to light, in the past week, that he attended this event, and he said that people in the media from certain Jewish quarters, that's a quote, he accused them of fueling criticism of a pro-Palestinian Labour MP. And he also said that Israel planned to, quote, get rid of Palestinians from Gaza and, quote, grab some of the land. So that has emerged since. So just going back to that, the very fact of, suggesting that there are people in the media from certain Jewish quarters is a sort of an old anti-Semitic trope, which suggests that Jews control the media. So right there, we're seeing that in this context.
Yeah.
And of course, again, saying that this was Israel's premeditated plan to get rid of the Palestinians from Gaza. So that reinforced the problem for Labour leadership to act. And then since then, it's come to light, who joined him in that meeting, and there's a former Labour MP for a place called Hyndburn, Graham Jones, and he's actually planning to run for election in the forthcoming general election. So that Azhar Ali, he's planning to be in the by-election.
Yeah.
But then this former Labour MP, Graham Jones, planning to run for election when the election does take place. He referred to Israel in language that I will not repeat. And he also said that UK citizens who volunteer to fight for the IDF should be locked up. And then a councillor from the same constituency, he's been suspended as well, Musif Dad. He attended as well. So there's three men here. So, this is an ongoing issue. So we need to see really what takes place, how Labour responds. But I would also probably suggest that this isn't just a problem with the Labour Party. I do believe it is a reflection of anti-Semitism that exists within the ideologies, which is quite widespread, actually, both, unfortunately, within large parts of the Muslim community, sadly, and also in some parts of the left wing of politics as well. That this sort of emergence, they've found a home, unfortunately, politically in the Labour Party. And even though everyone, of course, not everyone who supports the Labour Party, I hope it's obvious to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, that not everyone who supports the Labour Party generally, for all sorts of reasons, are in agreement with these anti-Semitic views. But it seems that those who do have these views have found a home politically in the Labour Party, and it's that which the party has to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. And it is important they deal with it, because like you said, most people who are voting Labour, this probably isn't even an issue for them. They're looking at their personal situation, hospitals, or the way the government's being run, whatever the situation is. There's lots of different reasons to vote for Labour. They're not even thinking about this, but unfortunately, it is a key and prominent issue within a lot of activism of Labour, is that they are anti-Israel, they're pro-Palestinian. And so this is a problem, because Labour could be our next government, and the majority of the country that votes for them will have no idea that this is going on, or it won't be on their radar. And so it is important that Keir Starmer deals with this and the leadership of Labour deal with it. And I think there's a couple of things, couple of points about this which I think are concerning. The first one is that they didn't get rid of him from the initial statements. The initial statements were anti-Semitic. He was victim blaming the Jews for murdering Jews. And then, going further and their war with Hamas in Gaza. And so I think there is a problem there, because I do think it shows a lack of wisdom or a lack of leadership in dealing with this issue. And I think like you said, there is anti-Semitism in all parties: Labour, Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, SNP, Greens, whoever it is. There is anti-Semitism there, and each party has to deal with it in their own way. And I think one of the things with this is it kind of blindsided them a bit, because it's one of their own who, for example, he was on the board of Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. He was actually someone who was there thinking he was combating anti-Semitism. Like, I was listening to, I can't remember who it was from Labour who said it, but she was talking about him saying, this doesn't reflect the years I've known him. Like, over 20 years, he's been an advocate against racism, against anti-Semitism. He's not been showing these things. So when I heard it, I thought, well, no, this can't be true. He didn't say that. And so it's that kind of, no, it's one of our own. Like, we can't accept this sort of thing. But I think, so there is that kind of initial blip I think they had where they didn't deal with it quick enough. But then that moves to my second point, which is actually a point you made earlier about the Muslim community. Unfortunately, no politician wants to ever address this issue, but there is anti-Semitism, unfortunately, within the Muslim community that is prominent. I think this is reflected as well when you look at the sort of when you look at the Israel-Palestinian conflict, right? Even me saying Israel-Palestinian conflict, it puts it between Israel and the Palestinians. Actually, it's the Israel-Arab conflict. It's a much bigger thing. The Arab League is united against Israel because they have a religious belief that puts them in opposition to Israel. I was listening to George Galloway even this week. He was talking to a Muslim community in a certain, I think it might have even been for the Rochdale by-election. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway. But he was saying, think about how you'll be judged on the Day of Judgment, like if you don't stand against Israel.
Wow.
He was saying that to the Muslim community, right? We know that 85% of Muslims are supportive of the Palestinians, right? We know that the hadiths teach from Muhammad himself that the last day will not happen unless the Muslims go to war against the Jews. That is literally what it says.
You said the figure 85%. So when we say 85%, I thought that was the figure of Muslims, percentage of Muslims that will determine who they vote for based on the Israel-Palestinian issue.
Yeah, you're right, actually. And that's only in Britain.
Because I actually think it's more than 85% of the Muslim community is probably pro-Palestinian. That's what I would think. But I think 85 is probably how the Muslim community will vote.
Yeah, so you're right. 85% actually shows the number of people who the Palestinian issue is so important to them that it will affect who they vote for.
Yes, yeah.
There's probably another 10, 15% who actually see Israel and the Palestinian conflict as important, but not important enough compared to other issues that they have that they're voting about. So yeah, I do think it is higher than that. And that is just the UK. That's the UK Muslim community. But again, like I said, the Arab League, for example, 26 countries that make up the Arab League, over 1 billion people, and they may have these issues against each other and wars against each other. They are all 100% united on the Israel-Palestinian, or the Palestinian issue is what they call it.
Yeah.
And they have put it as top priority. It's the one thing that unites them. Think about that.
Yes.
So this is why I think it's important we do talk about this. Politicians won't, because they don't want to be accused of Islamophobia or accused of anything like that. they basically, it's the elephant in the room that no one's talking about.
Yeah.
And I think we need to address that, because this, for example, this gentleman here, Mr. Ali, he was a leader in leading Muslims against anti-Semitism. You know, he had met with the Jewish community, and yet he is spouting anti-Semitism that comes from a deep place, right? And so this isn't just surface level anti-Semitism. It shows his deeper feelings on Israel, and the Jewish people as well.
And it reminds us of why it is so important that we have moral clarity in terms of standing with Israel, communicating the truth, because you can see how easily it has risen to the surface simply based upon the current conflict, how the anti-Semitism comes to the surface. But in politics, the leadership of the parties have a responsibility to make sure that these people who hold these views, are not on the ballot paper. And it's probably a good thing that there was a slight delay, because the further information which came to light as a result of that delay has also pulled up to other councillors who have similar views. So let's hope that process continues, not because we want to see, the Labour Party go through. We want to see all parties on the ballot paper, whatever views we might hold politically. We don't want to see anti-Semites running for public office. So let's hope that they continue to make some progress with that. But politics isn't the only sector, and I just wanted to mention one story in the news this week, and that was a doctor. Okay, because look, there are people in positions and different roles that do have views similar to that of the councillor we've spoken about. And then now and again you see it enter into their professional life. And this was a Harley Street doctor who referred to his Jewish colleagues in derogatory descriptions. I couldn't repeat what the terms that he was using. They included certain stereotypical descriptions of like nose features and things like that, but it went even further than that, so I can't repeat it. But he has been suspended for 3 months. This was in Hammersmith. He actually said that Hammersmith would be improved if it was Jew-free.
Wow.
Now, an independent tribunal has ruled that this doctor is not racist, and this is the exact terminology, okay? Not racist, but someone who is quite comfortable with using discriminatory language.
Wow.
I mean, that's one way of describing an anti-Semite, isn't it? Someone comfortable with using discriminatory language. And so they've imposed a 3-month suspension. But doesn't that just show how, like, within different sectors, there are... I mean, this man doesn't seem like a particularly nice character anyway, because there was other things not anti-Semitic as well, which he's been pulled up for.
Right.
But it just shows that we have to demonstrate in all professional sectors the fact that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. And language like that, in my mind, completely diminishes the severity of what anti-Semitism and where it leads to.
Yeah, exactly. And that whole, we're told all the time, zero tolerance to anti-Semitism. Well, there isn't a zero tolerance to anti-Semitism because the authorities are not dealing with it in any way. Like, okay, a 3-month suspension is a punishment of sorts, but it's not, they've basically excused his anti-Semitism because they literally said he's not racist, he's just comfortable saying racist things. I mean, you can't even make that up. It's the same as we were talking a few weeks back about the Hamas supporter who was openly supporting Hamas in the streets of London on video, and the police said, no, he doesn't support Hamas, even though Hamas is an outlawed terror group, they weren't going to take any action because they said what he was saying, which was open support for Hamas, was not open support for Hamas, and therefore they couldn't do anything about it. He wasn't breaking any rules. It's like, well, why even pass a law which says no support for Hamas is going to be tolerated? It's now illegal to support Hamas if the police themselves can't even define what open support for Hamas is. Like, when you literally are saying, I support Hamas, that's not support for Hamas. It doesn't make any sense. And it's the same with this. I think it's just, it shows that there's a deeper problem, I think, within society. And it could go back to this issue where people don't want to talk about the elephant in the room, where, you know, because it's someone of a certain group saying it, they don't want to mention that because they don't want any backlash, or maybe because it is seen as more acceptable within that community or whatever, you know. But I don't think you would see this same attitude if it was a neo-Nazi there who was saying the same things about any other race. Like, I honestly don't think there would be careful wording to excuse what was being said there. I think that person would be either thrown in jail or, you know, completely taken out of the doctor's system or medical system, whatever it is. He wouldn't be allowed to practice again because he could be a danger to patients who he is racist towards or whatever. I
think you're absolutely spot on when you say it is a problem in society, because there clearly is a problem in society, and we've covered that quite a few times on this podcast. But also, we have to recognize that in history there have been bad people who have anti-Semitic views that have been elected. And so, you know, if this is a reflection of attitudes towards Israel, then we have to ensure, going back to the by-election and the elections which are coming up, we have to ensure that there are not people on the ballot paper who are anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist, because unfortunately they will get voted for by people who agree with them as well. Now, I know some people would say, well, that's a democracy. Well, actually, anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism. And we should not tolerate it.
I mean, I do agree with that to a degree. I also am a free speech advocate, so I think let everyone say what they want to say.
I'm a free speech advocate, which is why I just said it.
Exactly. So it's like, but the thing is, it's sort of, I'm the sort of person where I'd say let everyone vote for whoever they want to vote for, but I would say the problem with it being in a mainstream party is they're not voting for that person because of their anti-Semitic or anti-Israel views. They're voting for that person because they support Labour. And I think that is the problem. I think if they want to set up the anti-Semitic party and be anti-Semites, they can do that. They'll get 1,000 votes, whatever, but they won't win. But if they're going in the false pretense of being Labour, being anti-racist, all these different things that Labour stands for, I think that's false advertising. And so I agree with you. They shouldn't be on Labour's ballot. If they want to start their own party or be independent, that's up to them. I think, you know, we're never going to be able to eradicate all of anti-Semitism.
Of course not.
But I do think we should hold the main parties to account. And that's on both the left, the right. Wherever anti-Semitism is shown, we will stand against it because we stand against anti-Semites. And if they stand as an independent, we'll still stand against them. But it's up to people to decide, you know, where they want to vote, who they want to vote for. So,
Well, as we move on, I mean, we've spoken about a lot so far about these anti-Semitic attitudes, but what a wonderful thing it is to be in the company of people who stand with us in support of Israel. And that's why, you know, we do this podcast. We're grateful for everyone that views, likes, comments, but just simply knowing that there are thousands and thousands of Christians who stand with us for this cause of believing that standing with Israel is the right thing to do. So it's important to remember that for all of those listening and watching, that even though we may feel some discouragement at seeing what might be happening in society, we have to realize that we are on God's side. We are on the side of truth and on the side of righteousness. And, you know, we thank the Lord that we have arrived at a point where we can see the truth. That's not of our doing. That's the very fact that we have been able to arrive at this point by seeing in the Bible of what God says about Israel, and we have decided, no matter how unpopular it might be, how it might go against what public thought is or whatever, we are going to stand with Israel, and we're going to stand with the Jewish people, and we're going to call out anti-Semitism wherever it exists.
Yep.
So I want to just assure those listening and watching that you're in good company, and at Christians United for Israel, we're grateful for all of your support, for standing with us in solidarity. And I just wanted to remind people that there are ways of standing with us by participating in our campaigns, by subscribing to our emails, by following our prayer points, and of course by being a member, by donating to CUFI, supporting the work that we are doing and standing with Israel in this nation. And if you would like to become a member or to make a one-off donation, then please go to www.cufi.org.uk/donate. And all of your support is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. Really do appreciate everyone who supports us. And yeah, the reason we're doing this is to spread the truth, to stand against anti-Semitism. And we can't do that alone. With your help, basically, we can do that together. Because we wouldn't be able to do any of this if it wasn't for our supporters, and so we really are appreciative of that.
Yes.
And we do dedicate ourselves to this cause, don't we? Like every waking moment, almost, we're sort of, reading, researching, talking about it, all the rest of it. Like we are fully committed to this cause, and we love Israel, and we'll be here for the long haul because CUFI isn't going anywhere. As long as you keep supporting us.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on then to let's move on to Gaza, shall we?
Yep.
And the current situation in that Israel has said that they've taken out more than half of the Hamas fighters.
Yeah.
And of course, as we've seen reported in the news this week, they are now approaching Rafah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not going to go into every detail of what's happening in the war. That's not something we've actually been doing throughout this conflict. But we are going to be talking about the need to pray for Israel at this time, because as people are probably aware from what's happening in the news, from different political leaders who are speaking out against Israel, many of the people who are allies of Israel, the US and the UK, are now putting more pressure on Israel to actually hold back and stop.
Yes.
Even though Israel is at the point where they are the closest they've been to destroying Hamas in its entirety. And I think the reason for that, personally speaking, is because it is a spiritual battle as much as it is a physical battle. Yeah. And I think, the forces of evil are doing everything they can to stop the destruction of Hamas. And they are putting all pressure on Israel. And I think it goes to a lot of things with UNRWA, the UN agency which looks after the Palestinian refugees. I think they are afraid of being exposed for their connections to Hamas. I think there's a lot of different aid organizations who are going to be exposed when Hamas is fully destroyed, because we're already seeing that.
And also media and journalist organizations. I mean, we had Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
We already know that Israel's identified journalists which have been members of Hamas. And then I think it was 2 weeks ago, one of their journalists in Gaza, they found a laptop belonging to him in a Hamas base.
Yep.
And they opened it up, and the photos and the files basically show him with, shooting guns, and he's revealed that he's actually a commander in Hamas, exactly. Not just supporting Hamas, a commander.
Yeah, and he was training people how to use those weapons.
And and he is an Al Jazeera reporter.
Exactly.
So there is a lot of things which are coming to light, as you rightly say, UNRWA as well, and
and I think as well, even with Western governments, I think there is a fear that because we know they have been supporting UNRWA, they've been funneling aid to Gaza to help with humanitarian aid, and yet Hamas has used that aid to build a subway system that's bigger than the New York subway system. They built tunnels, I should say, that's bigger than New York subway system, bigger than the London Underground.
Mm.
The two main leaders of Hamas are multi-billionaires. They're not even multi-millionaires, they're multi-billionaires with a B. They have more money than most celebrities, most, you know what I'm saying? Like, they are very rich people. How did they get that money? Well, the money was sent in by foreign aid organizations. UNRWA is majority funded by the West, not from any other nations. So it's Western money that has been funding Hamas, whether it's knowingly or inadvertently. It's obviously going to look bad on the West. There's obviously the angle of, like you're saying with Al Jazeera, Qatar directly funds Hamas. Al Jazeera is the state broadcaster for Qatar, right? So of course there is a connection there. But these are all things that the media doesn't really want to broach these subjects. When you type in information about, for example, the Al Jazeera journalist, the first pages that come up are Al Jazeera actually sort of defending Al Jazeera and that sort of thing. And it's like, that's the top Google search you'll get, is Al Jazeera popping up. And Al Jazeera is supporting Hamas anyway. Yeah. So it's not real media. It's not
so
real.
Are you suggesting then that you think that by raiding Rafah and sorting Rafah out, they will uncover more things, and that's why the West is reluctant? Because I think there is also concern, humanitarian concern.
Yeah, sorry. And I'll just rephrase some of, with the West, I think they're 100% focused actually on the human level. They want to stop Palestinians from being killed.
Yes.
They want, and ultimately we have to be sympathetic. Like, the Palestinians in Gaza are not having a nice time right now. It is a tough situation for them. War is horrible. War is brutal, right? And we also have to stress here, Israel is doing everything it can in its power to avoid civilian casualties.
Yes,
civilians have died. Innocent people have been killed. But that is not the intention of Israel.
Yeah.
And the reason that has happened is because Hamas started this war.
Yes.
And Israel is going to finish it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hyperbole. I was listening to a few people saying, what Israel's doing is, for example, the genocide claim. It is not genocide. When they say it is worse than any other war in history, well, the numbers clearly show that is not the case. There was someone who was claiming the other day that what Israel's doing was worse than the Allied bombings of Dresden and things like that. Well, the Allied bombings of Dresden killed 25,000 people in 2 days, and they were 90% civilian, and they were targeting civilians. When the US forces bombed Tokyo in World War II, they killed 88,000 people. I think the bombing raid was 2 nights or 1 night. So literally 1 or 2 nights. And that's not even...
That wasn't even Hiroshima.
That's not even Hiroshima or Nagasaki with the nuclear weapons.
That was the aerial bombardment.
Yeah, and
just go back to Dresden, because 25,000 civilians were killed in Dresden over 2 nights, and 25,000 is the figure that Hamas have been passing on to the media for this whole conflict, which of course is questionable in itself. Yeah. But I think the point that you're illustrating is a very good one, and that is, it does demonstrate, even though that's if that is a true
it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of that's a lot of people to fathom. Of course, many of them also should be pointed out that among those 25,000 are Hamas terrorists. Yeah, let's not forget that.
At least 10,000.
At least 10,000. But it does demonstrate the fact that you're absolutely right, Alex. Israel's campaign in Gaza is targeted, and it is not targeting Palestinian civilians. It is targeting Hamas terrorists.
Yeah, and also it's targeting Hamas infrastructure, because there is obviously a lot of destruction of infrastructure within Gaza. It's going to take a long time for them to rebuild. Yeah, there's obviously going to be long-term repercussions to what is going on. But the reason for that is because Hamas was able to build and, dig down and build these military facilities, which it which it used against Israel. And by the way, when Israel's going in and fighting, this isn't just Israel going in, killing unarmed people, bombing places. Like, Israel is fighting against a well-armed, well-funded terrorist group.
Yeah.
If the leaders of that group are billionaires, then you can imagine how much money there is within the group as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, every place they're going to where they are, you know, going into tunnels and going into, you know, schools, hospitals, homes, all the rest of it, they are finding, you know, rocket-propelled grenades. They're finding, you know, proper weaponry, right? They're not, you know, it's not going in there and just finding a pistol here and there. It's like, it is a lot of weaponry that they're finding. It's, you know, Hamas is much more well armed than you would imagine. Fortunately, though, they are not as well trained as they could be. And that is to Israel's advantage, because even though they may have the weapons to attack Israel, they're not actually as efficient at using them. And actually, this is something with the 7th of October massacre that came out quite strongly. And I think from seeing the footage personally as well, from the IDF video that was shown, one thing that you actually saw was these were a lot of people who they had the intention to kill, but they weren't necessarily the best trained. And you can see that by the fact that when there were a handful of Israeli police officers or soldiers, they were able to kill dozens of Hamas terrorists before they were then taken out, because they were outnumbered, 10-1, and yet the Israelis were killing far more Palestinians than the other way around when it came to gun battles within the kibbutzes and things. And I know that one of the kibbutzes actually managed to defend itself from hundreds of terrorists who were invading, and they only had a small force, but they were obviously a lot better trained than the Palestinians were. Now, that's not to say that all Hamas is not trained, because actually their elite teams that went against the soldiers on the 7th of October, they were actually trained in Iran and in other countries, I think Iraq as well, maybe even Syria, where Iran has a lot of forces. They were trained there, went back to Gaza, and then they were the elite teams that were able to take out the Israeli forces easier. But what actually it was like a sheer numbers game sort of thing. They had so many people invading. I think 3,000 terrorists invaded. They just overwhelmed the Israeli cities and towns, basically. That's what happened. So anyway, going back to the point of what's happening in Gaza, Israel is doing its best to avoid civilian casualties, but unfortunately there are still a lot of civilians who are being caught in this war. And we have to be sympathetic to them. Like, I mean, me and you have probably both seen images of, children who have been killed. It is sad, it is tragic, it is horrible, but this is unfortunately the consequence of war, the consequence of sin, of hatred, of anti-Semitism. All of these things have a consequence, and the world ignored what Hamas was doing for 15 years, 20 years, however long it was that Hamas has had control over the Gaza Strip. And Hamas told the world what they were doing. They gloated about it. They even said after the 7th of October attacks that they were happy that they had control over Gaza because it meant they had freedom. They didn't need to watch their backs. They could build their terrorist infrastructure with absolute freedom. And that's what they did. And they have always stated that their aim is to destroy Israel. That's their only aim. And now Israel is, changing its mode, because before it was saying, right, we can live peacefully next to you. But after the 7th of October, they changed and said, no, now is the time to destroy Hamas. And this is the consequence.
And that's what they're doing. And, strategically, a question would be raised, well, what if Israel didn't go into Rafah and it decided to backtrack? What would, I think the sentiment we're getting from the Israeli government and the IDF is that they're going to finish the job. And we saw Israel's intentions this week, of course, that dramatic rescue of 2 hostages that were thankfully saved and reunited with their families. And of course, Israel wants to return all of those remaining hostages who are still held captive by Hamas in Gaza. It's very clear, that that's the aim for Israel. But we've seen a great deal of reluctance from some of our leaders. The UK Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, who we spoke about at length in the last podcast, he has said that Israel should stop and think before entering Rafah, which is fine if he's suggesting, you need to be cautious here because of, civilian casualties could be very large. Okay, that's a valid point. But I'm sure that's a genuine concern. But I'm quite confident Israel is stopping and thinking before it takes these actions. And I think, what we're seeing from comments such as that, and also from the White House, is that there is a reluctance for Israel to carry on, full stop.
I think now, like people like David Cameron, I think he's calling for a ceasefire. He's calling for, I think he doesn't want Israel to carry on and destroy Hamas. I think he wants them to stop the war.
Or as President Biden said this week, a permanent pause.
Permanent pause, yeah.
which is interesting. A permanent pause is a
because a pause is a temporary thing.
Well, not really ceasefire is ceasefire is temporary in some ways, but
it's like when you pause. Yeah, when you pause the TV, it's not the same as stopping the movie, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference there. I think that is problematic. And I think when you look at like David Cameron, he, for example, was Prime Minister when the UK went to war against certain bad actors, for example, with Gaddafi in Libya. When he, struck Libya, he was the one giving the command for the UK forces to strike Gaddafi. They didn't say, right, Gaddafi's lost now, let's just let him be. He's not got a force, we'll just leave him there. No, they literally wiped out his convoy as he was evacuating and allowed the rebels to take him and murder him. Like, that wasn't, there was no sympathy or any, do you see what I'm saying there? Yes. It was like dealing with it till it's done. Look at what happened with dealing with the Nazis, right? In World War II. We didn't defeat the Nazis and say, okay, you guys are defeated, you can just stay in this little area and just exist, and we won't take you out completely. No, they went until they took out the Nazis and destroyed them completely, so they could never, ever again carry out any atrocities like this. Because with Hamas, the same thing is true. If you let them live, if you let them exist, they will regroup and regrow, and they will carry on their aims again, because the only aim they have is the destruction of Israel. Hamas have said it themselves. They do not care about the people of Gaza. They do not care about looking after them. They've even said that's the UN's responsibility, not their responsibility. They said their responsibility is to, take back the land of Israel from the river to the sea, whatever they say, carry out the intifada. That's what they're calling for. And that's why it's so important as well, by the way, that we talk about what's happening in the UK. Because in the UK, globalize the intifada, from the river to the sea, Palestine for free. These are actually Hamas narratives.
Yes.
They may sound like they are, well, they don't sound like they're peaceful when you call about intifada. But what I'm saying is they are the same cause, the same ideology that Hamas has. It's about the eradication of Israel. But unfortunately, Hamas has more than that. They want the eradication of the Jewish people.
Yes.
And it is a religious and ideological thing for them that they believe in. And they will not be stopped. Sorry, they will not be convinced out of it. They have to be stopped by force.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the only way to deal with it. It's the only way ISIS was dealt with when the Allies took out, not the Allies, the NATO forces took out ISIS. There just isn't any negotiation with these terrorists, unfortunately.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as Christians, of course, we need to pray for peace. We need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And there's no contradiction in wanting peace, praying for peace, and standing with Israel's right to defend itself. Here at CUFI, we have pledged to stand with Israel.
Mm.
And we're asking our supporters to also pledge with us. We have created a Christian pledge for Israel. And we've done this to give our supporters an opportunity to actually make a declaration of desire to stand with Israel at this time when it is, it's fighting for its survival. Let's face it. And the Jewish people are also facing a rise in anti-Semitism like that we have not seen in our generation.
Yeah.
And that's why we've called it a Christian pledge for Israel. And we recognize that, we have lots of Jewish friends who stand with us and support us, but we've deliberately called this as a Christian pledge for Israel because we wanted this to be an opportunity for Christians to demonstrate to our Jewish friends that we stand with it. We stand with you. We love you. We're going to keep our word. We're going to stand by our word. And we want that to be honourable to our Jewish friends and also honourable to God in standing with Israel. So I'm just going to read the words, if that's okay. This is a pledge which is online, and it only involves you typing in your name and hitting the send button. But this is what it represents. As a Christian, I stand on the authority of God's word concerning the nation of Israel and the land given to the Jewish people as an everlasting covenant. Therefore, I will bless Israel with my words and actions. I refuse to be silent in witnessing the evil of anti-Semitism and stand in solidarity with Jewish people worldwide. I will seek to be a beacon of truth for Israel in my church, my community, and my nation. I will pray for the peace of Jerusalem and speak words of blessing upon the Jewish people, declaring, quote, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." Because I am a Christian, I stand with Israel.
Amen.
To sign that pledge, please go to www.cufi.org.uk/pledge. And once you have signed the pledge, there is an invitation to share it with your friends on social media and also to print off this name collection sheet, which can be used to distribute among your friends at church or your prayer group or wherever you might be meeting other Christian friends, asking them to sign either online or by completing physically the sheet and then returning it to us here at CUFI. And we've already got thousands of names. We're expecting many thousands, and we want this to be a significant demonstration of a commitment on our part. We know it's not just about words, it's about actions, but actually it begins within here. It begins in our heart.
Yeah.
And we want our heart to be aligned to the will of God.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I honestly think this is one of our best sort of initiatives, really, because it is putting it as the Christian pledge. And we were saying before, okay, obviously we welcome everyone to support Israel, but we are Christians united for Israel. And we want this to be something that Christians can really rally behind and get behind and feel the spiritual connection to it as well as the logical, the head side of things. But it is I think it's a powerful statement. You know, me and you have both signed the pledge. We believe in this pledge because it is God's heart for Israel and the Jewish people. And it is God's heart for Christians to stand with Israel. And I don't think any other people group can claim that other than Christians and Jews, because we're the ones who have the Bible. We have the Word of God directing us and helping us to understand it from a deeper level and a deeper understanding.
Yes.
So,
amen. Yeah. Amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Alex. It's been good having this chat again.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us. We do value your participation by watching and listening to this podcast. But please don't stop there. Please share it. Please like it. Please comment. Please follow on whatever platform you are watching or listening to it on.
Yep.
And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Amen.